Have you ever wondered how much control you really have over the future? Could a single small choice arriving late, saying yes, saying nothing, change the entire course of your life? And if the tiniest details can ripple outward to shape history, then how much of reality itself is already bending from decisions too small to notice? Welcome to NeuroNap Academy. Tonight we'll drift through 101 amazing proofs that your choices shape reality, from the birth of chaos theory in a weather lab, to near-miss disasters that saved millions, to the chance encounters and silences that altered the destiny of nations. But here's the unsettling question: if every detail, every breath, every pause can alter what comes next, then how much of the life you're living is really choice, and how much is just the ripple of something small you never saw begin? So take a slow breath. Our journey doesn't start with revolutions or grand inventions, but with something almost invisible, a flap of wings, a misplaced decimal, a beginning so small it should mean nothing, yet it means everything. You begin with something so small, so unremarkable, that most would never notice it. A flap of wings in the humid air of the Amazon, a decimal point slightly shifted in a machine's memory. A single event so tiny it feels disposable, and yet in its wake, the entire future begins to bend. This is where the butterfly effect was born, not in fiction, not in myth, but in the cold world of mathematics and meteorology. The story begins with a man named Edward Lorenz, a meteorologist in the early 1960s. His goal was ambitious: to find a way of predicting weather over long periods. At first glance that seems reasonable. After all, we can predict eclipses centuries in advance, or chart the movement of planets millions of miles away. Why not the weather? Lorenz thought he only needed the right equations, the right data, and patience. What he discovered instead shattered not just meteorology, but the very idea of certainty in science. It happened in the quiet hum of his office, while running simulations on one of the earliest digital computers. Lorenz entered initial conditions, numbers representing air pressure, temperature, humidity, into the machine. He wanted to repeat a previous run, but to save time he entered shorter numbers, rounding them to 3 decimal places instead of 6. The difference was almost laughable. He went to get a cup of coffee. When he returned, the computer had finished its calculations. At first, the graphs seemed identical, but as the simulated days progressed, the patterns began to drift. What started as nearly identical curves soon diverged so dramatically that the two results bore no resemblance to each other. A tiny rounding error, 0.00127, had created 2 entirely different futures. This became the first proof of what we now call the butterfly effect. Small changes in initial conditions can create enormous differences later on. It wasn't poetry, it wasn't speculation, it was hard data. Lorenz had uncovered something profound. Predictability collapses when systems depend on too many variables. Now, why was this discovery so astonishing? Compare it with the motion of planets. If you want to know where Mars will be a million years from now, the math is simple. The solar system is vast but orderly, like clockwork, and the gravitational pull of planets follows precise laws. Give any physics student the right formulas, and they can predict it, but try the same with weather just 1 month ahead, and you're lost in uncertainty. And here comes the second proof: systems with many interacting variables are hypersensitive. Unlike the clean paths of planets, our atmosphere has billions upon billions of molecules colliding, moving, interacting. To predict the weather perfectly, you would need to know the exact position and momentum of every particle in the air, an impossible task. Miss even a fraction of that detail, and your forecast veers off into chaos. This is why, to this day, long-term weather forecasting is almost impossible. We can see a few days ahead, maybe a week, but beyond that, the smallest error grows until the prediction collapses. The butterfly effect revealed not the limits of Lorenz's computer, but the limits of human knowledge itself. It also gave rise to a third proof: chaos is not the same as randomness. At first glance, Lorenz's findings seemed to suggest weather was random, like dice rolling. But look closer and you see structure. Chaos means the system is deterministic, it follows rules, but those rules amplify tiny differences into vastly different outcomes. Imagine ripples spreading in a pond. Throw 2 stones almost side by side, and for a moment the ripples overlap neatly, but soon they collide, cancel, and reinforce each other in ways that no eye could predict. Order exists, but it produces unpredictability. The fourth proof comes from Lorenz's now famous metaphor. He explained his findings by suggesting that the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil might set in motion a tornado in Texas. The phrase caught fire in the public imagination. Of course, no single butterfly creates a tornado. Rather, the metaphor shows how small atmospheric changes compound over time. The real butterfly isn't the insect, it's the hidden detail, the decimal point, the missed variable that cascades into consequences. And then there is the fifth proof, the contrast between what is easy to predict and what is nearly impossible. As Lorenz himself said, it is easier to predict the orbit of a planet in a distant galaxy 10 million years from now than it is to know the weather in your city a month from today. The planetary system is simple, the atmosphere is not. That contrast became a powerful reminder. Predictability depends not on how much data we have, but on the nature of the system itself. Think about what this means for your own life. If the weather cannot be predicted beyond a certain point because of its sensitivity to beginnings, what about the chain of choices that brought you here? A decision you made years ago, what to study, who to talk to, whether to send that message. Those choices may have magnified in ways you could never have foreseen. Each action, each silence, like a butterfly flap, is recorded by reality, feeding into patterns that spiral beyond your reach. And so the butterfly effect isn't simply about weather or mathematics. It is about the terrifying and beautiful truth that nothing is isolated. Every decimal matters. Every choice becomes part of a future that cannot be undone. But this is only the beginning. If Lorenz gave us the science, fiction gave us the image that would linger in culture far longer, a butterfly, crushed underfoot, changing the world forever. And that story, our next step, made people feel, not just think, about the consequences of small acts. Picture this, you pay a fortune to travel back in time, not to change history, but to witness it. The company promises you safety, promises you the thrill of the hunt, and insists on one rule above all: do not step off the path. Stay on the floating walkway above the ground. Do not touch anything. Do not alter the past. The warning seems obvious, almost exaggerated, and yet in Ray Bradbury's short story A Sound of Thunder, a single man breaks that rule, and with it, the universe is reshaped. Bradbury's tale, published in 1952, is our first cultural proof of the butterfly effect. He described a future where wealthy hunters could step into a machine, travel back 60 million years, and shoot dinosaurs already fated to die. In this way, the past would remain untouched, but the story pivots on one hunter's fear. When the Tyrannosaurus appears, its power too overwhelming, the man panics and runs off the path. Mud clings to his boots, and when they return to the present, the world is not the same. Language has shifted, society has altered, and on the sole of his shoe lies the delicate body of a butterfly, a single insect crushed, and history itself rewritten. This is the second proof. Fiction prepared us to grasp what mathematics alone could not. Lorenz would not publish his work until years later, yet Bradbury had already imagined the idea in narrative form, allowing people to feel the weight of small changes. Science tells us what is. Stories tell us what it means. His story burned into collective memory, the metaphor of the butterfly as a trigger for unimaginable futures. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how many times in your own life has a decision felt trivial in the moment but monumental in hindsight? A text message you almost didn't send, the invitation you nearly refused, the moment of hesitation that saved you or cost you. Bradbury's story lingers precisely because it mirrors the way our lives feel. Fragile, contingent, always one step away from being completely different. The third proof lies in how culture embraced this story. Before Bradbury, few outside of specialized science circles considered the idea that the tiniest act could alter the course of history. After him, the concept became common thought. Movies, novels, even casual conversations began to invoke the butterfly. In a sense, his short story itself was a butterfly event, one piece of fiction rippling across decades of imagination, shaping how millions would interpret scientific discoveries later. Without Bradbury, Lorenz's work might have remained a technical curiosity, confined to meteorology journals. Instead, culture was already primed to recognize the metaphor, already ready to call it the butterfly effect. And here we arrive at the fourth proof, the interplay between imagination and reality. Fiction influences science just as science influences fiction. Consider how many young scientists began their careers inspired not by textbooks but by stories, tales of time travel, space voyages, alternate histories. Bradbury's butterfly did not stay on the page. It entered lectures, films, casual speech. It gave people a language to talk about unpredictability long before they understood chaos theory. It even shaped political commentary, where analysts speak of butterfly effects in elections, wars, and economies. What is fascinating here is not just the story itself, but its ripple. Bradbury's words created a lens through which billions now view the world. This is no small matter. The stories we tell alter the questions we ask, and the questions we ask alter the discoveries we pursue. A short story in 1952 may have shifted what researchers and ordinary people alike were willing to believe about cause and effect. That is its butterfly effect, fiction creating real intellectual change. And if a single story can do this, imagine the butterfly effects of the stories you tell in your own life. A bedtime story to a child, a casual comment to a friend, a joke shared at the right moment, each can ripple through memory, shaping confidence, choices, and entire futures. We rarely recognize the power of narrative until much later, but Bradbury's tale teaches us that no story is just entertainment. Each word is a wingbeat. So here we are with two great strands of proof already. Lorenz in his lab, Bradbury in his imagination. One showed the math, the other gave it meaning, but together they created something more dangerous, a sense that certainty itself might be an illusion. If a butterfly crushed beneath a boot could change the future, what else could? A skipped heartbeat, a misheard word. The question becomes sharper as we step into the next chapter. Because in reality, not just in fiction, Lorenz would return from his coffee break to find his computer had rewritten the future, and what he saw that day was not a story, but science in motion. You leave your desk for only a moment. The hum of a primitive computer fills the room, spitting out numbers line by line onto thin rolls of paper. It is the early 1960s, long before laptops and cloud simulations, when meteorologists relied on clunky machines with blinking lights and whirring fans. Edward Lorenz steps out for coffee, expecting that when he returns, his weather model will simply confirm what he had already seen before. Instead, he returns to find that reality itself seems to have shifted inside the machine. The first proof of this story lies in the detail that started it all, Lorenz's decision to shorten his numbers. In his earlier run, he had entered the value 0.506127. This time, to save time and paper, he entered only 0.506. To him, this was harmless rounding, a difference so slight it seemed meaningless. Surely the atmosphere would not notice, but the computer did. As the machine calculated the simulated days ahead, at first everything seemed fine. The lines of numbers matched the earlier run almost exactly, but gradually they began to wander. The differences multiplied. By the end, the simulated world bore no resemblance to the first. A fraction of a decimal place had rewritten the entire future of the model. That rounding error, small enough to be invisible to the naked eye, became a storm of divergence. This is the second proof complex systems magnify small uncertainties over time. At the start, the two weather runs were almost identical. After a few steps, they were cousins. After a few more, they were strangers. Imagine walking two paths in a forest. At first, they run side by side, but if one turns by just a degree, over miles they end in different landscapes altogether. That is what Lorenz saw. His decimal shift opened two separate universes. The third proof emerges from what scientists call deterministic chaos. The word chaos usually suggests randomness, but Lorenz's discovery revealed something subtler. The system was not random. The equations followed strict rules, yet because they were sensitive to beginnings, the outcomes could never be predicted with perfect accuracy. Every run was like watching dominoes fall, but not knowing which tiny tilt of a tile would change the cascade. Chaos, in this sense, is lawful unpredictability. There are rules, but the rules themselves make long-term foresight impossible. This realization led Lorenz to describe what we now call a strange attractor, a pattern that never repeats exactly, but never dissolves into pure disorder either. His graphs revealed swirling loops, delicate shapes that seemed almost alive. This was the fourth proof. Chaos hides order inside it. Beneath the unpredictability of weather lay structures, beautiful looping patterns that gave the system shape, even as no single future could be guaranteed. To Lorenz, these figures looked like butterfly wings opening and closing, folding back on themselves infinitely. The metaphor was no accident. He had discovered not just chaos, but the hidden geometry of unpredictability. And here comes the fifth proof, the lesson of limits. Lorenz realized that the dream of perfectly predicting the weather was doomed from the start. It wasn't a matter of better machines or more data. The system itself resisted long-term foresight. You could forecast a few days, maybe a week, but no more. Beyond that, the uncertainties in initial conditions grew too large. This insight reshaped meteorology, economics, even philosophy. It suggested that in many systems, climate, ecosystems, even human choices, absolute certainty was an illusion. Pause here and reflect on what Lorenz's coffee break truly revealed. We like to think of the world as stable, as something that bends to our calculations. Yet Lorenz proved that even when rules exist, the outcomes can slip from our grasp. His coffee break wasn't just an interruption, it was a portal. He left his office expecting routine, and returned to find that predictability itself had collapsed. Think of how this applies to your own life. You cannot run two identical simulations of yourself, one where you sent that message, and one where you didn't, and watch them unfold side by side. But if you could, you might find, as Lorenz did, that the difference becomes enormous over time. A conversation missed could mean a friendship lost, a career path diverted, an entire lineage altered. Each decimal in your life compounds. And yet, within that unpredictability lies something beautiful. Just as Lorenz found patterns in chaos, you might find that your own unpredictable choices form a strange attractor loops and swirls of experience that never repeat but always echo. Your life may feel chaotic, but look closer and you see structure, themes that repeat, values that guide, relationships that return in new forms. Like Lorenz's butterfly-shaped graphs, your path is unpredictable, but not meaningless. This is why the butterfly effect resonates so deeply. It is not only about storms and simulations, it is about you. It is about how the tiniest details of your life, an email sent too late, a delay at a traffic light, a glance across a room can spiral into consequences you could never have calculated, and like Lorenz staring at his diverging graphs, you may only realize the difference much later, when the outcomes are no longer the same world you once knew. So far we have walked through mathematics and fiction. We have seen Bradbury's crushed butterfly and Lorenz's decimal shift. Both remind us that certainty is fragile, that the smallest events ripple outward endlessly. But this raises another question. If small changes can create new futures, how do they move through time? Do they always grow? Do they always matter? The answer lies in a metaphor you already know, the domino. When one falls, another follows, and then another, until the whole line crashes down. But unlike dominoes set in a straight line, life's dominoes are scattered, tilted, and unpredictable. One push may do nothing, another may bring the whole system down. In the next chapter, we'll step into this idea and explore how each choice is not just a flap of wings, but the first in an unending chain of falling pieces. Imagine a row of dominoes, standing perfectly upright, each one waiting for the faintest touch. The first is barely taller than your fingertip, the last as tall as a skyscraper. With a gentle push, the smallest falls into the next, and then into the next, until a chain of motion builds into a collapse of immense force. This is not just a parlor trick, it is a metaphor for life itself, and our fourth great vision of the butterfly effect. The first proof is the domino effect itself. Each decision you make is like tipping the first tile. Alone, it may seem insignificant, whether you walk left or right, whether you speak up or stay quiet. But like dominoes lined in a row, one decision leads to another, and then another, until the momentum grows into something much larger than you ever intended. A simple choice can cascade through relationships, careers, even generations. Just as a single push topples an entire field of dominoes, a single choice reverberates through time. The second proof lies in how these chains of choice compound over years. Think of it as interest building on a tiny deposit. A decision made today might feel small: what to study, which skill to practice, who to spend an afternoon with. Yet with time, that choice gains weight. It determines who you meet, what you learn, what doors open and close. Years later, the entire architecture of your life may trace back to a moment so small you barely noticed it. Each domino is not isolated, it waits for the hand that will set it in motion. But unlike the tidy line of dominoes, life is not linear. This brings us to the third proof, the Jenga block analogy. In the game of Jenga, you remove wooden pieces one by one, carefully balancing the tower. Some blocks slide out easily, others, if disturbed, bring the whole tower crashing down. Life works in the same way. Many choices are small enough to leave the structure stable, unnoticed, but every now and then one block holds more weight than you can see. Remove it and everything shifts. The difficulty is that you never know in advance which choice will be the critical one. The fourth proof is the unsettling truth that no decision is truly isolated. Each action interacts with others, weaving a net of consequences that stretches across time. When you think you are making a trivial choice, you may actually be setting off a sequence that touches countless other events. Like dominoes, scattered not in a neat line but in unpredictable patterns, one falling piece may hit another at an angle, triggering chains you never foresaw. Even inaction becomes a choice, a block removed, a domino nudged. Now pause for a moment and consider your own life. Think of a decision you once thought small. Perhaps you took a different route home. Perhaps you agreed to attend a gathering you almost skipped. Perhaps you sat next to someone by chance. At the time it felt like nothing, but now, looking back, you see the line of dominoes it toppled. Friendships, opportunities, even identities that would never have existed otherwise. The butterfly effect is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is hidden in the quiet fall of one piece into another. What makes the domino metaphor so haunting is its balance between simplicity and unpredictability. You know that one push can cause a cascade, but you do not know how far the cascade will travel or which pieces will be struck. Some fall quickly, others resist. Some stand untouched for years before finally tipping. This is why the butterfly effect fascinates us. It is not that everything changes instantly, but that consequences spread slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize the entire shape of your life has shifted. And here lies the philosophical reflection: how much control do you truly have? If every choice ripples outward, then every moment is filled with unimaginable weight. Yet paradoxically, you cannot calculate which choices matter most. Some of the big decisions, career paths, relocations, declarations, may not be the ones that change your future most profoundly. Instead, the decisive moments might be the unnoticed ones, the words spoken in passing, the kindness offered without thought, the chance meeting you almost avoided. The dominoes do not tell you which one holds the tower together. There is a strange kind of freedom in this realization. If every choice has the potential to matter, then you do not need to know which one is the big one. You only need to live with awareness that nothing is wasted. Each domino has its place, each block contributes to the tower. Each small action carries the possibility of shaping more than you will ever see. So when you look back, do you see your dominoes? Can you trace the chain of choices that led you here? And more importantly, do you realize that right now, in this moment, you are tipping the next tile? This sense of fragility brings us to a moment in history when one man's choice, one refusal to tip his domino, kept the entire world from collapsing. It was not fiction, it was not mathematics, it was a decision in the middle of the Cold War that prevented nuclear annihilation, and that is where we turn next. Picture the year 1962. The world holds its breath as two superpowers stand on the edge of nuclear war. Missiles are pointed, fleets are positioned, leaders on both sides are restless, sleepless, calculating their next move. One false step, one misinterpreted signal, could ignite a chain reaction that consumes millions of lives. It was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and history tells us how close humanity came to ending itself. Yet the reason we are here today, the reason the map of the world still exists in recognizable form, may be traced not to presidents or generals, but to one quiet man on a Soviet submarine. The first proof lies in the submarine's mission itself. Off the coast of Cuba, a Soviet vessel patrolled the waters, armed with a nuclear torpedo. The crew believed they were hidden, undetected, watching the tense standoff from beneath the waves. But American ships above had found them. Depth charges, small explosives meant as signals, were dropped into the water, urging the submarine to surface. To the crew, trapped in the dark and heat of the vessel, it felt like bombs. They had no communication with Moscow, no way of knowing whether war had already begun. The second proof emerges from the decision that followed. The captain of the submarine, convinced that hostilities had erupted, gave the order to arm the nuclear torpedo. The logic was brutal. If the Americans were attacking, retaliation was justified. Fire the weapon, and the world would be dragged into nuclear exchange. 2 men on the submarine agreed, but there was a rule. All 3 senior officers had to give their consent before the launch, and the third, a man named Vasily Arkhipov, refused. This refusal is the third proof, the butterfly effect embodied in one human decision. Arkhipov's dissent meant the torpedo was never fired. His single act of resistance, quiet, perhaps even desperate, stopped a weapon that could have set off a chain reaction across continents. Imagine the dominoes we traced earlier. This one stood firm, refusing to fall, and by doing so kept billions from toppling behind it. One man, against his captain and his peers, altered the fate of the planet. The fourth proof lies in the consequences we avoided. Had Arkhipov agreed, the torpedo would have struck. The Americans would have responded with overwhelming force. Nuclear missiles already on high alert would have been launched. Cities would have burned. The Cold War would not have remained cold. It would have ended in ash. The planet we know, the lives we live, might never have existed. Entire nations, family lines, and possibilities would have been erased in hours. Arkhipov's refusal preserved futures we cannot even count. And here is the fifth proof. History is not always decided by those in power, but by those in the shadows. Leaders in Washington and Moscow may have believed they held the fate of the world in their hands. But on that submarine, in suffocating heat and fear, the choice fell to one officer. Arkhipov's courage is rarely mentioned in the same breath as presidents or prime ministers, yet without him, there might be no world to discuss. The butterfly effect does not always flap its wings in palaces. Sometimes it trembles in silence, deep under the sea. Now, think of the weight of that moment. How many choices in your own life might carry consequences you cannot see? You may not decide the fate of nations, but you decide the fate of relationships, of families, of your own unfolding path. Arkhipov could not have known the full extent of his decision. He only knew that pressing forward would mean destruction. He chose restraint, and that restraint rippled outward into history. What makes this story so haunting is its reminder of fragility. The world did not avoid nuclear war through strategy alone, but through the conscience of one man. Civilization balanced on the shoulders of someone unknown to most. It raises a question you cannot easily escape. If a single person can save the world, could a single person also end it? This thought brings us back to the butterfly metaphor. A fragile creature, unnoticed, crushed underfoot, alters the course of history. A fraction of a decimal, entered differently, changes the shape of a storm. A single refusal, made in the dark belly of a submarine, prevents the collapse of humanity. The scale differs, but the principle remains. The smallest act, the quietest choice, holds unimaginable weight. And yet Arkhipov's story is not only about survival, it is about possibility. Because his refusal preserved futures, it allowed countless other butterfly effects to unfold. Children were born who might never have existed. Ideas flourished that might have been silenced. Technologies were invented, stories written, friendships formed, all because one torpedo was never fired. Think of the irony. We often imagine history as a march of great events, shaped by wars and treaties, but sometimes history pivots on what did not happen, on a silence, a refusal, a pause. Arkhipov's silence echoes louder than any explosion might have. And in that silence lies a lesson. The future is not just made by actions taken, but by actions withheld. So far we've seen weather altered by decimals, fiction reshaping culture, simulations collapsing into chaos, and now history itself preserved by a single voice of dissent. Each proof builds into a picture that is at once terrifying and hopeful. Terrifying because so much hangs by so little. Hopeful because it shows us the immense power that rests in even the smallest hands. And this power does not stop at war or peace. It stretches into medicine, into science, into the preservation of life itself. For just as one man prevented destruction, another discovered a cure that preserved generations. And that is where we turn next, the butterfly effect of vaccines, and how a single breakthrough reshaped the destiny of humanity. Picture the world before vaccines. Cities gripped with fear, parents terrified each summer as a mysterious illness spread through swimming pools and playgrounds. Children fell ill overnight, some paralyzed, others struggling to breathe. Polio was a shadow that haunted families across the globe, striking without warning, leaving scars that lasted a lifetime. In the early 20th century, this disease was one of the most feared in existence. And then, in 1955, a single announcement transformed that fear into hope. The first proof begins with Jonas Salk, the man credited with developing the first effective polio vaccine. His work did not simply reduce illness, it altered the very architecture of the future. By introducing immunity at a global scale, he prevented millions of deaths and disabilities. This meant more children growing into adulthood, more families preserved, more dreams allowed to flourish. Each life saved became a butterfly effect in itself, leading to descendants, inventions, and contributions that would never have existed otherwise. Entire family lines survived because of a syringe filled with carefully prepared antigens. The second proof lies in the ripple effect of preserved generations. Without the vaccine, many of today's most influential people might never have been born. The entrepreneurs who shaped industries, the artists who created works of beauty, the leaders who guided nations, any one of them could have been cut off before their time. Vaccines do not just save individuals, they preserve futures. The choice of one scientist to dedicate his life to research cascaded into billions of lives spared from suffering. The impact of that choice is immeasurable, stretching across continents and centuries. The third proof comes from the timing of Salk's discovery. In history, timing often matters as much as the discovery itself. Had the vaccine come decades later, entire generations might have been lost, families devastated, communities destabilized, economies disrupted by waves of illness. Instead, the vaccine arrived at a moment when polio was at its peak, when fear was greatest, and thus its effect was amplified. By intervening at the height of crisis, Salk shifted the trajectory of humanity. This reveals how the butterfly effect does not just depend on the act itself, but on when and where it happens. The fourth proof lies in the broader legacy of vaccines as butterfly events. Beyond polio, the principle of vaccination has reshaped human history. Smallpox, once a devastating killer, was eradicated entirely. Measles, diphtheria, and countless other diseases were pushed back. Each vaccine is not just a scientific milestone, it is a doorway to alternate futures where entire populations survive that otherwise would have vanished. Think of it this way, every vaccine dose given is like tipping a domino toward life instead of death, toward growth instead of decline. Now pause for a moment and reflect. When you imagine the butterfly effect, you may think of storms, wars, or chance encounters, but vaccines remind us of another kind of ripple, the quiet preservation of possibilities. A child who survives illness goes on to learn, to love, to create. Their descendants multiply, weaving threads of reality that extend far beyond anything the original scientist could have foreseen. Salk could not have imagined every ripple of his discovery, but he knew that saving even one life would matter, and in truth he saved millions. There is also a moral layer here worth considering. Salk famously refused to patent the polio vaccine. When asked who owned the patent, he replied, "The people. Could you patent the sun?" This choice itself was a butterfly effect. By refusing profit, he ensured the vaccine could spread faster, saving more lives. Had he chosen otherwise, access might have been delayed, restricted by cost, and countless more might have died. His decision to put humanity above personal gain changed not just science, but ethics. It stands as proof that choices, even after discovery, shape the size and reach of their ripple. So what does this mean for you? Most of us will never invent a vaccine, but each of us has the power to preserve possibilities. When you offer help, when you protect someone vulnerable, when you make a choice that values others over yourself, you may be saving futures you cannot see. Just as Salk never knew the billions who would benefit, you may never know the full ripple of your kindness, but the ripple is there. It spreads whether you notice or not. In this light, the butterfly effect is not always destructive or chaotic. Sometimes it is profoundly healing. It shows us that a small act, one discovery, one refusal, one decision, can protect entire generations. If destruction can ripple outward, so too can compassion. And so, from storms of weather to storms of war, and now to the storms of disease, we see the same truth repeating. The smallest beginnings can create the largest futures. But what happens when those beginnings involve not science or politics, but something as fragile as human relationships? What happens when the butterfly effect is written not in equations or vaccines, but in the chance encounter that leads to love, family, and entire bloodlines? That is where we go next. Love often feels grand, like a sweeping force of destiny, but if you look closer, you see that it is stitched together from the smallest of accidents. A glance across a room, a word spoken at just the right moment, a seat chosen on a bus. Each of these tiny beginnings can lead to a relationship, to a family, to entire generations that would never have existed without that fragile choice. Love is perhaps the most human version of the butterfly effect, and it shows us how deeply the smallest turns can shape reality. The first proof lies in chance encounters. Imagine two people walking into the same cafe. Perhaps one of them almost didn't come. They considered staying home, or choosing another place, or arriving 10 minutes later, but they walked in at just the right moment, and their eyes met. That meeting begins a conversation. The conversation becomes a friendship. The friendship deepens into love. A family tree is born out of seconds of timing. Remove that chance encounter, and not only do they lose a relationship, but all their children, grandchildren, and descendants vanish from history. Entire futures evaporate because of a decision as small as ordering coffee at a certain time. The second proof comes from the near misses that shape relationships. Consider the text message you almost didn't send. Maybe you drafted it and hesitated, wondering if it was worth it. You clicked send, and because of that, someone replied. A conversation began. Plans were made. Love unfolded. If you had deleted the message instead, your entire life might look different today. In this way, romance often hangs on fragile hinges, not grand gestures, but moments of hesitation or courage that open doors to worlds we cannot foresee. The third proof is the sliding doors effect, named after the idea that one small difference in timing, catching or missing a train, creates two entirely different realities. In one, you meet someone who changes your life. In the other, you walk past them forever, never knowing what could have been. Think of how many couples have stories of almost not meeting, of coincidences that seem too strange to ignore. They attribute it to fate, but beneath the poetry lies the butterfly effect, the recognition that timing, place, and decision combine to create futures that hinge on minutes or even seconds. The fourth proof lies in the ripple of these relationships across generations. When two people come together by chance, they do not just shape their own lives, they shape the lives of their children, grandchildren, and beyond. Entire bloodlines are created from a meeting that might never have happened. A casual hello at a party can echo centuries into the future, producing family lines that transform communities, nations, and even history itself. The butterfly effect is not only about chaos and storms, it is written in family trees, in the multiplication of moments into lives. The fifth proof comes from the fragility of alternatives. Think of all the people you passed by in your life, all the conversations never started, all the choices that might have led to a different partner, a different family. Each path contains its own potential bloodline, its own ripple into the future. You cannot live them all, you only live one. But the awareness that your family exists because of such delicate accidents can shift how you see the world. It reminds you that love is not only romance, but randomness, the collision of timing, choice, and chance. Now pause for a moment, reflect on the people in your life who matter most. Can you trace back the tiny steps that led to them? The coincidence of being in the same place, the decision to speak, the willingness to risk vulnerability. At the time, those moments may have felt small. Now they form the foundation of your world. What makes the butterfly effect of love so powerful is that it hides behind ordinary events. Meeting someone is not accompanied by flashing lights or cosmic music. It feels like just another day, and yet, in that day, a universe shifts. The smallness of the beginning disguises the enormity of the outcome. This is why so many people describe their love stories as meant to be. It is not that fate wrote the script, it is that the improbability of it all feels too immense to ignore. The truth is both humbling and astonishing. If one detail had shifted, if one choice had been different, your world might not include the people you love most today. There is a tenderness in recognizing this fragility. It can make you more grateful, more aware of the miraculous ordinariness of daily life. You may never know which glance, which word, which message will tip the domino that shapes your future, but love teaches us that the smallest of acts can hold the weight of eternity. And if love can ripple forward through generations, altering bloodlines and destinies, what about chance meetings on larger scales? What about the moments when people collide not only to form families, but to form nations, revolutions, or inventions? The butterfly effect is not confined to intimacy, it expands outward into history itself, and in the next step of our journey, we will explore how one meeting, one introduction, can alter the course of entire civilizations. History often feels like it is written by inevitability, leaders rising, empires falling, revolutions erupting, but if you peer more closely, you see that many of these turning points began not with inevitability, but with something fragile, almost accidental, two people meeting by chance. A conversation, an introduction, a moment of connection can ripple outward into wars, movements, and inventions. This is the butterfly effect at the scale of nations, and its power is as startling as it is humbling. The first proof comes from an encounter in the Russian revolutionary movement. In the early years of the 20th century, Lenin and Trotsky were not yet the towering figures of history. They were men in exile, scattered by the currents of politics. Their meeting was not scripted by destiny, but born of circumstance, an accident of geography and timing. Yet that meeting forged an alliance that would shape the Russian Revolution, topple an empire, and usher in a century of geopolitical upheaval. Had they not crossed paths, history might have unfolded differently. Another revolution might have risen, or perhaps none at all. Millions of lives were caught in the ripple of that single introduction. The second proof lies in a far more recent story, the meeting of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Both were young, curious, and passionate about electronics. Wozniak had the technical brilliance, Jobs the vision and ambition. They met through a mutual friend, almost casually, and their conversations began to grow into plans. Out of that connection came Apple, a company that has reshaped communication, culture, and technology worldwide. Think of how many devices exist today, how many industries were disrupted, how many lives were altered, because two men happened to share ideas in a garage. Without that meeting, perhaps you would be holding a different device in your hands right now, or perhaps the world would still be waiting for the personal computer revolution. The third proof is found in Gandhi's famous train incident, a moment that was both an encounter and a collision. In South Africa, Gandhi was thrown from a train for refusing to move from the whites-only section, despite holding a valid ticket. That humiliation, that violent meeting with injustice, transformed him. He later described it as the moment he resolved to resist oppression with non-violent defiance. Out of that one event grew a movement that challenged colonialism, inspired civil rights struggles worldwide, and forever changed the language of protest. A chance confrontation at a railway station became the spark for one of history's greatest philosophies of resistance. The fourth proof emerges when you consider how often revolutions begin with conversations, not battles. Picture the cafes of Paris before the French Revolution, or the gatherings in American taverns before independence. Ordinary meetings, students, writers, merchants talking over coffee or ale, became the incubators of radical change. The butterfly effect lives in these moments of dialogue, where one idea passes from one mind to another, gathers strength, and eventually erupts into the streets. Without the chance for those individuals to meet, to exchange words, the momentum of history might never have taken shape. Now pause and imagine how different your own world might be if certain people had never met. Consider your closest friend, your partner, your mentor. The meeting that connected you was likely accidental in some way, shared geography, shared timing, shared circumstances. Yet from that meeting grew a bond that shaped who you are. On a smaller scale, your life mirrors the same principle that alters nations. Encounters are the gateways to futures. What is striking is that meetings feel ordinary when they happen. You rarely know in the moment that this person will alter your life, or that together you might alter the world. Jobs and Wozniak were just two young men tinkering with machines. Gandhi was just a traveler on a train. Revolutionaries were simply talking over coffee. But the ordinariness is the disguise. The butterfly does not announce its storm when it flaps its wings. The consequences appear only much later, when the ripples have traveled outward beyond sight. This realization invites humility. We often imagine history as driven by genius or force, but it is also driven by coincidence. Who meets whom, when, and where. You cannot control every meeting in your life, but you can recognize the possibility that each carries. Every handshake, every introduction, every conversation could contain the seed of something larger. And so, from revolutions to inventions, from empires to technologies, we see that meetings matter. They may seem casual, but they hold nations in their hands. The butterfly effect, in this sense, is not only about storms and simulations, it is about relationships. It is about the moments when human beings collide, and the future shifts because of it. But sometimes it is not even the words spoken or the alliances forged that create the greatest ripples. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes what changes the world is not an action, but the refusal to act, the choice to remain still when the world demands motion, and that is where we turn next. When we think of the butterfly effect, we often imagine dramatic actions, choices, inventions, revolutions. But sometimes the most powerful ripple begins not with a shout, but with silence, not with action, but with stillness. In a world that urges us always to move, to decide, to speak, There is something extraordinary in the moments when someone does not. These pauses, these refusals, have shaped history just as profoundly as any storm or invention. The first proof comes from the art of rhetoric itself. Winston Churchill, remembered for his powerful wartime speeches, often used silence more than words. He would pause deliberately, letting the weight of his message hang in the air. The silence was not emptiness, it was a force. Those pauses allowed people to fill the space with their own fear, their own hope, their own imagination. They amplified the impact of his words in ways that continuous speech never could. In this sense, silence became a tool of persuasion, a butterfly flap that rippled through the hearts of millions during one of the darkest chapters of the 20th century. The second proof lies in an act of refusal. Rosa Parks choosing not to stand. On December 4, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Parks remained seated when ordered to give up her bus seat. She did not raise her voice or strike out in anger. She simply stayed where she was. That silence, that stillness, reverberated outward into the civil rights movement, igniting boycotts, protests, and eventually landmark legal changes. Parks' decision not to move, not to obey, was itself a butterfly effect, quiet yet unstoppable, changing the lives of millions who came after her. The third proof is found in tragedy, the missed warning before the Titanic disaster. Operators on nearby ships had sent out alerts of icebergs, but one radio operator, exhausted after hours of messages, set aside a critical warning. The silence of that single decision, choosing not to send the message to the bridge, contributed to the collision that cost over 1,500 lives. Here, silence was not heroic but catastrophic, proving that the butterfly effect is not always benevolent. Absence, too, can ripple outward with devastating force. The fourth proof comes from the realm of diplomacy. Treaties and declarations often hinge on signatures, and sometimes delays or refusals alter the course of nations. Consider the moments when peace agreements sat unsigned for just long enough to collapse, when silence at the negotiating table meant war resumed instead of ending. The absence of a signature, a hesitation at the wrong moment, has extended conflicts and reshaped maps. The butterfly here is not a decision made, but a decision withheld. The fifth proof lies in personal life, as much as history. Silence in relationships. A word left unsaid, an apology never given, a secret kept too long. These choices shape families and friendships for decades. Sometimes silence heals, giving space for reflection. Other times it wounds, creating distance that grows into permanent separation. Just as in politics or war, the absence of action carries its own kind of power. The butterfly effect does not discriminate between speech and silence. Both ripple outward in ways we cannot predict. Now pause and reflect. How many moments in your own life were defined not by what you did, but by what you did not do? Perhaps you stayed quiet when you might have spoken. Perhaps you held back when you could have stepped forward. At the time, it felt small, perhaps even invisible. But looking back, you see the consequences of that pause, that stillness, as clearly as if you had acted. Silence is paradoxical. It is both fragile and immense, both empty and full. It can preserve peace, as when restraint prevents conflict, or it can unleash disaster, as when warnings are withheld. What unites these examples is that silence is never neutral. It is itself a choice, a flap of wings that may feel weightless, but carries the power of storms. This idea deepens the butterfly effect in unexpected ways. We tend to focus on action, on doing, but history reminds us that inaction is equally decisive. Rosa Parks' stillness, a radio operator's neglect, a leader's pause, all shaped futures as much as battles or discoveries. Every silence holds within it a future that might never be reclaimed. And yet, silence also invites reflection. It allows us to see how delicate the fabric of history truly is. It suggests that the moments we dismiss as nothing may in fact be everything, for in that nothingness the future bends. So far we have seen storms, revolutions, inventions, and even silence shaping the course of reality. But what happens when the butterfly effect emerges, not from politics or protest, but from creativity itself? What happens when a tiny idea grows into technologies that redefine how humanity lives, works, and dreams? That is the ripple we follow next. Technology often feels like the product of grand vision, of deliberate genius shaping the future with foresight and precision. But if you look carefully at the stories behind our greatest inventions, you find something else. Small sparks, fleeting insights, accidents, and overlooked details. These are the butterflies of human creativity, and from their wings have come machines and tools that redefined what it means to live in this world. The first proof lies in the light bulb, one of the most iconic inventions in history. When we think of Thomas Edison, we imagine a single moment of brilliance, a light flicking on and banishing the dark. But the truth is humbler, and far more in line with the butterfly effect. Edison and his team tested thousands of materials for the filament: cotton, bamboo, paper, even human hair. Most failed, but then they discovered that a particular carbonized bamboo filament could burn for over 1,200 hours. It was not destiny, it was persistence meeting accident. The difference between a filament that failed in minutes and one that lasted for weeks was the difference between a laboratory curiosity and the foundation of modern civilization. A tiny choice of material shifted the entire trajectory of technology. The second proof emerges from the origins of the internet. Today it feels inevitable, as if humanity was always heading toward a connected world. But the internet began as a military experiment called ARPANET, designed to allow communication in case of nuclear war. Its creators imagined a tool for survival, not for social connection. Yet from those humble beginnings, the network grew into the backbone of modern life. Social media, streaming, global commerce, all ripple outward from a decision to connect a few computers with rudimentary code. A butterfly flapping in the halls of defense research eventually reshaped culture, politics, and even human relationships across the globe. The third proof comes from CRISPR, a revolutionary tool in genetics. For decades, scientists studied how bacteria defend themselves against viruses. In their DNA, bacteria carried strange repeating sequences that seemed unimportant. For years, these sequences were overlooked, a curiosity without explanation. Then researchers realized that these patterns were part of a bacterial immune system, a way to recognize and cut invading viral DNA. From that small discovery came CRISPR, a method of editing genes with unprecedented precision. What began as an obscure detail in microbes is now rewriting the future of medicine, agriculture, and biology itself. The smallest of sequences became the sharpest of tools. The fourth proof lies in the invention of the airplane. At the dawn of the 20th century, the Wright brothers were not leading scientists but bicycle mechanics. They studied balance and aerodynamics by watching birds and testing small gliders in their workshop. From those fragile experiments came the first powered flight in 1903. What seems now like the opening of the skies was, at its core, two men tinkering with wood, cloth, and wire. Their small adjustments, an extra curve here, a different control lever there, turned failure into success. The airplane was not born in the laboratories of empires, but in the hands of mechanics adjusting details few others thought mattered. The fifth proof shows how trivial beginnings often birth technologies far beyond their original scope. Consider how a small adjustment in transistor design in the mid-20th century made computers possible. Early transistors replaced bulky vacuum tubes, shrinking machines from room-sized giants to something that could eventually sit on a desk and then in a pocket. That single shift, a fragile piece of material handling current more efficiently, became the butterfly that launched the digital revolution. From banking to medicine to art, almost every aspect of modern life flows from that minuscule change in circuitry. Pause for a moment and reflect on these stories. Each technology feels monumental now, but at the time the choices were small, the discoveries almost accidental. The difference between light and darkness was a bamboo filament. The difference between isolation and global connectivity was a military experiment. The difference between incurable disease and future therapies was a curious bacterial sequence. The difference between walking on Earth and soaring through skies was the persistence of two mechanics. This is the butterfly effect written in circuits, engines, and codes. It shows us that invention is not a straight line of genius, but a storm of small decisions, any one of which might have failed or been forgotten. The world we inhabit is the result of those fragile victories. And here lies the philosophical reflection: how much of what we call progress depends on details we dismiss as trivial. How many potential revolutions lie hidden in overlooked experiments, in dusty notebooks, in failed prototypes. The butterfly effect teaches us that the smallest spark may light a fire across centuries. It is humbling to realize that the world we know could so easily have been different, delayed, or never arrived at all. And yet, not all discoveries came from deliberate research. Some of the most transformative technologies were born of pure accident, a spill, a mistake, a miscalculation. If deliberate choices can ripple outward, so too can unintended slips. And in the next chapter, we will step into those accidents to see how human error became one of history's greatest engines of change. We often imagine invention as the product of precision, of careful planning, of deliberate intent, yet history reminds us again and again that some of the greatest breakthroughs were not planned at all. They were the result of spills, slips, errors, and accidents. The butterfly effect does not discriminate between genius and mistake. A dropped dish, a forgotten experiment, a miscalculated procedure, each can ripple outward into revolutions. What was once dismissed as failure becomes, with hindsight, the birth of something extraordinary. The first proof comes from one of the most famous scientific accidents, the discovery of penicillin. In 1928, Alexander Fleming returned from vacation to find that a petri dish of bacteria in his laboratory had been contaminated by mold. Instead of discarding it, he noticed something remarkable. Around the mold, the bacteria had died, leaving a clean ring. The mold produced a substance that killed harmful microbes. This accident led to the first true antibiotic, a discovery that would save millions of lives. Entire wars were fought differently because of penicillin. Soldiers who would have died from infection survived. Families that would have lost children were spared. A forgotten dish became the butterfly whose wings spread across the medical world. The second proof is another story of heat and chance, the microwave oven. In 1945, Percy Spencer, an engineer working with radar equipment, noticed that a chocolate bar in his pocket had melted during an experiment. Curious, he placed popcorn kernels near the magnetron tube, and they began to pop. The microwave oven was born, not from intention, but from curiosity about an accident. Today, billions of meals are prepared with this device, and its influence extends beyond convenience, shaping diets, industries, and even cultural habits. One melted chocolate bar led to a revolution in the kitchen. The third proof lies in a failed adhesive that became a household staple. In the 1960s, a scientist named Spencer Silver at 3M was trying to create a powerful glue. Instead, he accidentally made a weak adhesive that barely stuck at all. For years, it seemed useless, but later, another scientist at the same company realized it could be used to make removable notes. Thus, the Post-it note was created. What began as a failure became one of the most widely used office supplies in the world. Think of how many ideas, businesses, and projects have been shaped because a sticky yellow square carried a message. An invention meant for strength changed the way people communicate small reminders. The fourth proof comes from the mysterious glow of X-rays. In 1895, Wilhelm Röntgen was experimenting with cathode ray tubes when he noticed that a nearby fluorescent screen was glowing even though it was shielded. Curious, he placed his hand between the tube and the screen and saw the shadow of his bones. This accident gave birth to medical imaging. The ability to see inside the human body without surgery revolutionized medicine. Millions of diagnoses, treatments, and lives depend on that discovery. A strange glow in a laboratory became a window into the hidden structures of life. Now pause and reflect on what these accidents tell us. None of these scientists set out to make the discoveries that changed the world. They stumbled into them. What mattered was not the accident itself, but the willingness to notice, to ask, to explore. Fleming could have thrown away the moldy dish. Spencer could have ignored the melted chocolate. Röntgen could have dismissed the glow as interference. But instead they paid attention to what most would have overlooked. This is the heart of the butterfly effect in accidents. It is not only the mistake that matters, but the choice to see meaning in it. Every error carries within it the possibility of discovery. The smallest slip may open the largest door, but only if someone is willing to walk through. There is a philosophical lesson here for all of us. We often see mistakes as dead ends, failures as wasted effort, but history suggests otherwise. Mistakes are simply pathways not yet understood. They may contain opportunities waiting to be noticed. What feels like failure in the moment may, with time, reveal itself as the first step toward transformation. And so just as dominoes fall, just as silence echoes, just as meetings ignite revolutions, mistakes too ripple outward. They remind us that the future is not only shaped by what we plan, but by what we never intended. The butterfly does not always fly straight. Sometimes it stumbles, and in that stumble lies the seed of change. But the butterfly effect is not only seen in inventions and accidents, it also appears in the patterns of nature itself, shapes and designs that repeat endlessly, hinting that small beginnings can unfold into infinite complexity. From mistakes we now turn to patterns. to the fractals that show us how order can emerge from chaos, and how the tiniest seed can bloom into an infinite design. Imagine drawing 3 dots on a piece of paper, labeling them A, B, and C, then imagine choosing a random point between them, and with each step plotting a point halfway toward one of the 3 corners. At first, the page looks scattered, random, meaningless, but as you keep repeating the process, something astonishing emerges, a precise, intricate pattern, symmetrical and beautiful. What began as chaos unfolds into order, revealing the deep truth that small, repeated actions create vast and complex results. This is the fractal, and it is one of the clearest windows into the butterfly effect. The first proof lies in the chaos game, the very process just described. Mathematicians found that by following a few simple rules and repeating tiny steps, a coherent pattern appears. The pattern is called the Sierpinski triangle, a fractal that demonstrates how structure arises from simple beginnings. Each point by itself means nothing, but taken together, multiplied over time, they create order too vast for the eye to deny. This is the butterfly effect made visible. The smallest moves repeated endlessly shape designs of infinite depth. The second proof is the Mandelbrot set, perhaps the most famous fractal in mathematics. When you zoom into it, the pattern never ends. It repeats itself endlessly, but with variations spiraling into infinite detail. The Mandelbrot set reveals that complexity is not built from complexity, it is built from simplicity repeated. A single equation, applied again and again, gives rise to beauty beyond imagination. This shows us that small beginnings do not only ripple outward, they expand inward as well, spiraling into worlds within worlds. The third proof comes from nature itself, where fractals are everywhere. Look at the branching of trees, the veins of leaves, the shape of rivers, the structure of lungs. Each follows fractal rules, small patterns repeating at larger and larger scales. In your own body, the branching airways of your lungs mirror the branching of trees. Tiny vessels multiply until they create a system capable of sustaining life. One small structure, repeated endlessly, keeps you breathing. The butterfly effect is written into your biology, showing that tiny building blocks create the vastness of life. The fourth proof lies in the philosophy of fractals, self-similarity across scale. In life, as in fractals, small decisions often resemble larger patterns. The way you handle a single conversation echoes the way you handle relationships. The way a society responds to small conflicts echoes the way it responds to large ones. Just as a fractal repeats infinitely, your choices echo in ways that shape the structure of your existence. The fifth proof emerges from the connection between fractals and chaos theory itself. Lorenz's graphs of weather systems, his strange attractors resembled butterfly wings, looping and spiraling without ever repeating exactly. These were fractals too, hidden within the mathematics of weather. They showed that even in chaos, order lurks beneath. The butterfly effect is not pure disorder, it is patterned unpredictability, a strange balance between law and freedom. The fractal proves that unpredictability does not mean meaninglessness, it means hidden structures exist waiting to be revealed. Now pause and consider what this means for your own decisions. Each action you take may feel small, scattered, like a random dot on a page, but over time, these dots align into patterns. The way you speak, the way you act, the way you choose, all repeat and compound. Your life becomes a fractal, a pattern of self-similarity across time. You may not see it in the moment, but when you look back, the design is there. This is the profound connection between fractals and the butterfly effect. Both remind us that order emerges from small steps. Both remind us that the tiniest motions are not wasted. Each is a brushstroke on a canvas too large for you to see in one glance. Each is a wingbeat in a storm too vast to trace. Philosophically, this offers both comfort and caution. Comfort because it means your small actions matter. They are part of a pattern greater than you. Caution because it means nothing is trivial. Even the smallest choices repeat and amplify. The pattern of your life is not built in a single moment, but in thousands of repetitions, each contributing to the fractal design. And so, from mathematics to nature, from geometry to philosophy, fractals reveal the hidden architecture of the butterfly effect. They are proof that small things, multiplied, become infinite. They are proof that chaos and order are not opposites but partners, shaping reality together. But fractals also prepare us for another truth. Sometimes the butterfly effect does not create beauty. Sometimes it saves lives or costs them through nothing more than timing. A missed train, a delayed step, a choice made seconds later, can mean the difference between life and death, and that is the ripple we will follow next. Fate is often imagined as a grand script, carefully written and unchangeable, but the butterfly effect reminds us that sometimes the script is nothing more than timing, seconds gained or lost, a pause here, a hesitation there, a train missed, a plane delayed, a step taken too late or too soon. In those small differences, entire lives are spared or ended. History is full of stories where timing was everything, where survival or disaster hinged on moments so fragile they could have gone unnoticed. The first proof comes from the Titanic. On April 10, 1912, thousands boarded what was called the unsinkable ship, yet among them were also those who never made it. Some missed the departure because of illness, chance, or last-minute decisions. J.P. Morgan, the financier who owned the company behind the Titanic, cancelled his trip at the last moment. So did several others, for reasons as small as feeling unwell or changing schedules. Their absence saved their lives. Meanwhile, others who boarded at the last minute sealed their fate. The butterfly effect is written into the passenger list of that doomed voyage, lives ended or spared because of the smallest timing differences. The second proof comes from September 11, 2001. On that morning, countless individuals were delayed by missed trains, heavy traffic, or small accidents. Some workers in the World Trade Center survived simply because they were running late. Others escaped because they stopped for breakfast or because their alarm clock failed. These tiny inconveniences, moments often cursed in daily life, became the reason they lived. The butterfly effect here is brutal but undeniable. Timing alone reshaped destinies, sparing some while taking others. The third proof emerges from accidents avoided by delays in everyday life. There are countless stories of people who missed flights that later crashed, who were delayed in traffic and avoided being part of pile-ups, who stepped aside for one moment and thereby escaped disaster. Each of these incidents reminds us that the smallest changes in schedule, the seconds we rarely notice, can create vast differences in outcome. You could call it chance, fate, or luck, but at its core it is the butterfly effect, small beginnings spiraling into life or death consequences. The fourth proof lies in the philosophy of fragile balance. Think of how precise the timing of your own life is. If your parents had met one day earlier or one day later, if you had taken a different turn on the way home, if you had lingered a little longer in one place, you might not exist in the form you do now. Survival is not just about resilience or strength, it is about timing, and timing is the most delicate of butterflies. Now pause and reflect on this truth. How many moments in your own life were shaped by timing you could not control? Perhaps you missed an appointment, and that delay led to meeting someone who changed your life. Perhaps you were spared an accident by a turn of events you only recognized later. At the time it felt like frustration or inconvenience, but in hindsight it was the flap of wings that redirected your path. What makes these stories haunting is that they reveal how close we live to alternate realities. A few minutes of difference, and everything changes. This closeness is both terrifying and comforting. Terrifying because it shows how fragile life is, comforting because it suggests that even when you feel powerless, unseen forces of timing may be working in your favor. The missed train may not only save you, it may place you where you are meant to be. Philosophically, this raises an unsettling question. How much of survival is choice, and how much is accident? We like to believe our safety comes from preparation, strength, or foresight. But these stories suggest another layer. Survival often rests on randomness, on timing we cannot control. And yet, within that randomness lies the same truth as always, the butterfly effect. Small moments matter. They matter more than we can ever calculate. And so, from Titanic survivors to office workers spared by late trains, from delayed flights to accidents avoided, we see that timing is itself a force of destiny. It is the clockwork of the butterfly, the rhythm of its wings. But timing does not only spare or end lives. In the realm of war, timing and detail have often shifted the fate of entire nations. A rainstorm, an alarm clock, a lost message. These details have rewritten history on the largest scales, and that is the ripple we will follow next. War is often remembered through its grand strategies and decisive battles, through the names of generals and the weight of armies. Yet, if you look closer, you find that wars are also shaped by accidents, delays, and seemingly trivial details. A storm, a misstep, a missing message. These can alter the fate of nations as surely as cannons and treaties. The butterfly effect thrives in the chaos of war, where the smallest change can mean victory or defeat. The first proof lies at Waterloo, where Napoleon's final battle was decided, in part by weather. On the morning of June 1815, heavy rain had soaked the fields. Napoleon delayed his attack to let the ground dry, believing that mud would hinder his artillery. That delay gave the Prussian army time to arrive and join the fight against him. What seemed like a minor inconvenience, a muddy field, became the reason Napoleon lost his empire. A storm the night before helped shape the map of Europe for a century. The second proof is from World War II. On the morning of D-Day, Hitler, the man whose decisions had cost millions of lives, overslept. While Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, his generals hesitated, unwilling to wake him without his orders. Hours passed before reinforcements could be sent. By then, the Allies had established a foothold. The largest invasion in history succeeded, not only through courage and planning, but also through a delay caused by one man's sleep. The third proof comes from a lost courier bag during the Franco-Prussian War. In 1870, the French army captured a messenger carrying secret orders from the Prussians. The documents revealed their movements, allowing the French to win a crucial engagement. One man's loss of a bag, perhaps only moments of carelessness, reshaped the outcome of battles and prolonged the war. The butterfly effect does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the form of misplaced papers. The fourth proof is another story of communication, this time a broken radio. During the Pacific Campaign of World War II, Japanese forces on certain islands failed to receive updated orders because their equipment malfunctioned. They prepared for an attack in the wrong location, leaving them vulnerable. The Allies exploited this misstep, turning battles in their favor. The war's vast machinery of planes and ships turned, in part, on a tiny defect in a radio that silenced a crucial message. The fifth proof is broader but no less important. Countless battles have been decided by details that commanders could not foresee: fog covering the battlefield, soldiers misinterpreting orders, or supply wagons arriving late. These details remind us that war is not only about strength but about chance. Armies may prepare, but the smallest variance can redirect the outcome. The butterfly effect in war is both relentless and merciless. Now pause and reflect on what these stories mean. We often view history as inevitable, that Napoleon was doomed, that Hitler would fall, that battles were won by sheer force, but history was never inevitable. It was fragile. A storm delayed an attack. A man slept too long. A bag was lost. A radio broke. These details, which might have gone unnoticed, shaped the world we live in today. There is a sobering lesson here. If the butterfly effect operates so powerfully in war, then history itself is written not only by the strong but by the small. Empires rose and fell because of mud, silence and mistakes. The lives of millions turned on factors no one could control. Philosophically, this challenges how we think about power. Leaders may imagine themselves in control, but in truth, they are subject to forces as delicate as weather or chance. The arrogance of control collapses when confronted with the reality of chaos. We may call these moments accidents, but they are also proof of a deeper truth: the smallest conditions matter. And this realization leads us to another dimension of the butterfly effect: hidden variables. In war, as in life, unseen details shift outcomes in ways that cannot be predicted. We may not see them until it is too late, but they are always there, waiting to ripple outward. And it is those hidden forces, invisible yet decisive, that we will explore next. Life often feels uncertain, not because we lack effort or intelligence, but because we cannot see every piece of the puzzle. Beneath the surface of every event lie countless hidden variables, tiny, unseen details that shift the outcome in ways we could never anticipate. The butterfly effect thrives in these shadows, showing us that what we cannot measure still matters, and that unpredictability is not the absence of order, but the amplification of what we fail to notice. The first proof is found in mathematics: sensitive dependence on initial conditions. Lorenz himself used this phrase to describe why his weather models diverged so drastically. It is not that the system was lawless, but that even the smallest hidden variable, a fraction of a degree in air temperature, a tiny fluctuation in humidity, magnified into massive changes over time. The lesson is profound. Without complete knowledge of every condition at the start, prediction collapses. And since perfect knowledge is impossible, hidden variables guarantee that the future will always contain surprise. The second proof lies in one of physics's oldest mysteries, the three-body problem. Imagine trying to predict the orbits of three celestial bodies interacting with each other, say the Sun, Earth, and the Moon. Two bodies are simple enough, their paths can be calculated, but add a third and the system becomes wildly complex. Tiny variations in position or momentum, too small to measure, cause trajectories to diverge unpredictably over time. Here, even in the vast emptiness of space, hidden variables reign. Planets and moons follow laws, yet their interactions create chaos from details we cannot track. The third proof comes from the stock market, a human-made system that behaves much like nature. Prices rise and fall, not only because of visible trends, but because of countless hidden factors: investor moods, global whispers, sudden shifts in confidence. A single rumor can ripple across continents, altering the value of companies overnight. Economists try to predict markets, just as meteorologists try to predict weather, but both are governed by hidden variables too numerous to measure. A single butterfly flapping in the world of finance, a tweet, a hesitation, a misinterpreted phrase can trigger cascades that change the wealth of millions. The fourth proof lies in personal life, in the details you never even notice. Perhaps you met someone who changed everything for you, but only because of countless unseen coincidences. The way traffic delayed you, the way they chose a seat, the way weather shifted your plans. To you, the meeting feels meaningful, even destined, but beneath it were hidden variables you will never fully know. The butterfly effect works invisibly, building outcomes from details too small for you to see until they bloom into something undeniable. Now pause for a moment and consider this. How much of your life is shaped by what you cannot perceive? We like to believe we are in control, steering our own course, but hidden variables surround us: the traffic light that turned red, the server that lagged, the heartbeat you skipped. All are small, unnoticed conditions that may have nudged you into one path instead of another. Your story is not written only by what you see, it is written by the countless invisible forces playing behind the curtain. This realization is both humbling and liberating. Humbling, because it shows the limits of our control. No matter how carefully we plan, hidden variables will intervene. Liberating, because it reminds us that unpredictability is not failure, it is the nature of life itself. We are not meant to see every variable, we are meant to live within the flow, accepting that some of the most important forces are invisible. And here lies the philosophical reflection. The butterfly effect teaches us not only about science, but about humility. It tells us that control is an illusion, and that we are always surrounded by hidden causes. It invites us to live with openness, knowing that the unseen may bring disaster, but also joy. The variables we cannot track may be the very ones that introduce love, opportunity, or discovery into our lives. So far we have seen hidden variables in mathematics, physics, markets, and human encounters. But what happens when those hidden ripples move not through numbers or nature, but through people themselves, through the networks of conversation, connection, and influence that bind us together? In the next step, we will explore how the butterfly effect spreads through human networks, where one word or action can ripple across entire societies. Imagine the world as a vast net of threads, each thread representing a person, each knot a point of contact. When one thread is plucked, the vibration does not stay local, it spreads across the entire web, reaching places far beyond sight. This is the butterfly effect inside human society. Every word, every gesture, every connection travels through invisible pathways, multiplying into consequences that reshape culture, relationships, and even the course of history. The first proof comes from a famous experiment in social science, Stanley Milgram's 6 degrees of separation. In the 1960s, Milgram asked volunteers to send letters to strangers across the United States, but only by forwarding them through acquaintances. What he found astonished him. Most letters reached their destination in about 6 steps. This revealed that all humans are connected by surprisingly short chains. The implication is profound. An idea or action taken in one corner of the world can reach another with remarkable speed. You are never far from anyone else. The butterfly's wings flap in your circle, and through just a handful of connections, ripple across the planet. The second proof lies in the phenomenon of virality. On social media, a single post, sometimes no more than a few words or an image, can spread to millions in hours. The original author often cannot predict which message will ignite and which will vanish, but once the ripple begins, it grows exponentially. From memes to movements, from jokes to revolutions, we have witnessed how a single click, a single share creates cascades of influence. A thought once private becomes a storm. The butterfly effect thrives in this digital ecosystem where small sparks can ignite global fires. The third proof comes from rumors, those fragile fragments of speech that spread faster than facts. In villages, towns, and even nations, one whispered idea can alter perceptions, shift behaviors, and even topple institutions. During times of war and crisis, rumors often decide the mood of a population more than official declarations. A single unverified story can spread through networks until it feels like truth. This shows that influence is not about the size of the source but the structure of the network. A butterfly flapping its wings in gossip can destabilize entire communities. The fourth proof reveals itself in the ripple of mentorship. Consider a teacher inspiring a single student who grows to shape thousands. Many scientists, writers, and leaders trace their path back to one encouraging word, one act of belief from a mentor. That small encouragement ripples outward into generations. When you teach, when you guide, when you influence even one person, you alter not only their future but the futures of all they will touch. A teacher's quiet moment of recognition can echo in ways neither teacher nor student can ever measure. The fifth proof lies in the contagion of influence across networks. Psychologists have found that behaviors such as kindness, generosity, or even obesity and smoking spread through social networks. If one person changes, their friends are more likely to change, and their friends' friends as well. Each action is not contained. It radiates outward in widening circles. Your choices, even those that seem private, may influence people you have never met, 3 or 4 degrees away. You are both a node and a ripple in the vast human web. Now pause and consider what this means for your own life. Every interaction you have, an act of kindness, a harsh word, a piece of advice, travels beyond the person in front of you. It enters the network, carried by memory and influence, spreading farther than you will ever see. You may never know who is touched by your ripple, but the ripple exists nonetheless. The butterfly flaps its wings in your living room, and somewhere far away, a storm of change gathers. Philosophically, this invites a new way of seeing responsibility. You are not isolated. You are not a single thread cut off from the web. You are part of a network that magnifies your choices. This can feel heavy, as though every action carries unbearable weight, but it can also feel hopeful, for it means that your smallest acts of goodness, smiling at a stranger, offering a word of encouragement, standing firm in your values, can spread in ways you may never imagine. You will never trace every ripple, but you can trust they exist. The butterfly effect in human networks is both intimate and vast. Intimate because it begins in the smallest acts between individuals. Vast because those acts scale outward into global influence. The digital age has made this more visible than ever, but the principle is ancient. Humans are connected, and the smallest vibration travels through the net. And if influence can ripple like music through networks of people, what about literal music itself? What about vibrations and harmonies, tiny shifts in sound that create both beauty and collapse? In the next step, we will see how the butterfly effect reveals itself in resonance, in harmony, in the fragile balance between order and chaos in the language of music. If the universe has a language, perhaps it is music. Vibrations, rhythms, waves, they are everywhere, from the beating of your heart to the hum of the cosmos itself. And just like in life, in music, the smallest change can transform the entire experience. A single note slightly altered, a shift in timing, a resonance out of sync, and harmony becomes dissonance, stability becomes collapse. The butterfly effect is not only written in storms and stories, it is written in sound. The first proof comes from resonance, the way small vibrations can accumulate into immense power. One of the most dramatic examples is the collapse of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in 1940. Engineers had built a suspension bridge across Puget Sound, elegant and slender, but when the wind blew at just the right speed, the bridge began to sway. The resonance amplified, the vibrations grew, and soon the entire structure twisted violently until it collapsed into the water. No bomb, no earthquake, just wind, the gentle flap of the atmosphere, building into catastrophic destruction. The butterfly effect in physics had turned soundless vibrations into a visible disaster. The second proof lies in music itself, where the smallest shift changes everything. In an orchestra, one instrument slightly out of tune alters the entire piece. Harmony depends on fractions of vibration, on notes aligning in delicate ratios. Change the pitch by the tiniest amount, and beauty dissolves into noise. Musicians know this intimately. One hesitation, one breath too long, one finger misplaced, and the performance transforms. The audience may not know why, but they feel it. A butterfly's wing in music is not a metaphor but a literal vibration of air that shapes emotion. The third proof emerges from improvisation, particularly in jazz. In this form, musicians respond to one another in real time, building patterns out of freedom. A single note, played differently, can change the direction of the entire piece. One improviser introduces a phrase, another answers, and soon the music has shifted into a place no one expected. If you rewind and alter that first note, the whole performance would be different. Jazz is chaos theory in sound, lawful unpredictability, small beginnings compounding into endless possibilities. The fourth proof lies in the science of resonance in the human body. Your own heart, for example, beats with a rhythm that can fall into synchrony with others. Studies have shown that when people sing together, their heart rates begin to align. When crowds chant or march, their bodies fall into collective rhythm. This synchronization begins with small signals, breath, pulse, vibration, but expands outward into unity. The butterfly effect is at work inside your chest, turning individual rhythms into collective harmony. Now pause and reflect on what this means. Sound is nothing more than vibration in the air, invisible waves rippling through space. Yet these waves can destroy bridges, inspire tears, or synchronize thousands of people. The smallest changes in frequency, timing, or amplitude alter the entire effect. This is the butterfly effect made audible, showing us that fragility and power are two sides of the same note. Philosophically, this reminds us that life itself is a kind of music. Each of us plays our part, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in dissonance. Small actions, our words, our gestures, are like notes in a composition, resonating with others in ways we cannot always predict. At times, a single action destabilizes the whole. At other times, it brings unity, creating something larger than any individual could. Just as music balances between order and chaos, so does existence. And if sound can ripple outward with such force, what about nature itself? What about ecosystems, where the presence or absence of a single species can transform entire landscapes? The butterfly effect is not only audible, it is ecological, and that is the ripple we follow next. Walk into a forest, and at first glance it feels eternal, solid, unchanging. Yet every leaf, every insect, every bird is part of a delicate system where even the smallest adjustment can alter the whole. Ecosystems are living fractals, patterns of life repeated across scales, and within them the butterfly effect is everywhere. Remove one species, introduce another, change a detail too small to notice, and entire landscapes shift. The first proof lies in the Yellowstone wolves. In the mid-20th century, wolves were hunted and eradicated from the park. Without predators, deer and elk populations grew unchecked, stripping vegetation and altering the land. Then, in 1995, wolves were reintroduced. The effect was astonishing. As deer avoided certain areas, plants regrew, stabilizing riverbanks and changing water flow. Birds returned, beavers thrived again. Wolves, a single species reintroduced, reshaped an entire ecosystem. This is ecological dominoes. One predator returns, and rivers themselves change their course. The second proof comes from the disappearance of bees. These small pollinators sustain crops, flowers, and entire food chains. When bee populations decline, even slightly, the effect ripples outward. Crops suffer, animals lose food sources, humans face shortages. The fragility of global agriculture rests on the wings of insects so small most people ignore them. A butterfly effect in the most literal sense. Winged creatures sustaining civilizations. The third proof emerges in Australia, where the introduction of cane toads to control pests created chaos. The toads multiplied uncontrollably, poisoning native predators that tried to eat them. Entire food chains collapsed because of one misguided intervention. What was meant as a small solution became a sprawling ecological disaster. Here the butterfly effect shows its shadow, good intentions unraveling into unintended harm. The fourth proof lies in the concept of keystone species. These are organisms whose presence or absence disproportionately affects their ecosystems. Sea otters, for example, prey on sea urchins. Without otters, urchins explode in number, devouring kelp forests that sustain countless other creatures. The removal of a single species cascades into the destruction of an entire habitat. The butterfly effect in ecology reminds us that power does not belong only to the largest predators, it often rests in the balance of the small. The fifth proof stretches into climate itself. Tiny changes in atmospheric gases measured in parts per million transform global systems. Carbon dioxide, though only a trace gas, amplifies heat, shifting weather patterns, melting ice, raising seas. Entire nations face flooding because of subtle chemical variations in the air. This is the butterfly effect at planetary scale. Invisible molecules, countless and small, building into storms that reshape human history. Now pause and reflect. These stories remind us that nature is not stable but dynamic, not permanent but fragile. Every species, every detail plays a role. You may not notice when bees vanish, when wolves return, when toads multiply, but the ecosystem notices. The rivers shift, the crops falter, the forests collapse or thrive. What looks eternal is, in truth, a web so sensitive that a single tug rearranges the whole. Philosophically, this invites humility. Humanity often imagines itself separate from nature, as though ecosystems bend to our will. But the butterfly effect teaches otherwise. We are not above the web, we are part of it. Our actions ripple outward into forests and oceans, just as theirs ripple back to us. The extinction of one species is not just their end, it is the beginning of countless other changes, many of which we cannot foresee. This interconnection can be terrifying, but it can also be hopeful. Just as harm ripples outward, so too does restoration. Reintroduce wolves, protect bees, preserve kelp forests, reduce emissions, and the system heals. The butterfly effect is not only destructive, it is regenerative. Small choices, multiplied, can restore balance. And if ecosystems can shift from the presence or absence of a single species, what about human health? What about the bacteria and viruses inside us, where the smallest changes ripple through our bodies and our societies? That is where we turn next. The butterfly effect within the invisible world of microbes. The smallest creatures on Earth are often the most powerful. Invisible to the naked eye, microbes outnumber us, surround us, and even live inside us. For most of history, humans did not know they existed, yet our entire story has been shaped by their presence. The butterfly effect is perhaps most striking here. One mutation, one microscopic shift, can ripple outward into pandemics, cures, collapses, or revolutions. The first proof comes from the Black Death. In the 14th century, a bacterium carried by fleas on rats spread across Europe. It killed tens of millions, wiping out nearly half the population in some regions. But beyond its devastation, the plague altered history itself. Labor became scarce, shifting power from lords to workers. Old structures of feudalism cracked, paving the way for the Renaissance. A microbe, invisible and unnoticed, toppled centuries of order and opened the door to new cultural flourishing. A wingbeat at microbial scale reshaped civilization. The second proof lies in smallpox, the virus that once ravaged continents. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, smallpox spread among indigenous populations who had no immunity. The results were catastrophic, entire cultures decimated. This viral ripple changed the balance of power, allowing conquest to proceed where it might otherwise have failed. Yet centuries later, smallpox became the first disease eradicated by vaccine. Here the butterfly effect ran in two directions, first destruction, then salvation. A tiny virus changed not only who lived and died, but the very trajectory of human expansion. The third proof is more recent, the 1918 influenza pandemic. Emerging at the end of World War I, it killed more people than the war itself. What is striking is how quickly it spread. Soldiers carried it across oceans, and within months the virus had touched nearly every corner of the world. Entire communities were emptied, but the pandemic also reshaped medicine, spurring public health systems, research and surveillance that would guide later generations. A microscopic shift in a virus's genes created waves that reached into policies, science and global cooperation. The fourth proof lies in the microbiome inside you. Trillions of bacteria live in your gut, shaping digestion, immunity, even mood. A small shift in these populations caused by diet, stress, or antibiotics can ripple outward into health or illness. Scientists now study how these microbial butterflies influence conditions ranging from depression to obesity. The smallest organisms inside you play a role in who you are, reminding us that the butterfly effect is not only external, it lives within, in the silent conversations between your body and its invisible inhabitants. Now pause and reflect on what these stories reveal. We often imagine power as something visible, armies, governments, storms, yet microbes prove that power often hides in what we cannot see. A bacterium carried by a flea, a virus crossing species, a gene mutating in silence. These are beginnings so small they escape notice, yet their ripples reshape empires, economies, and identities. Philosophically, this humbles our sense of scale. We may feel vast compared to microbes, yet our fates are tied to theirs. The balance between life and death, between flourishing and collapse, sometimes rests on changes too small for human eyes. The butterfly effect here teaches us that visibility is not the same as importance. And yet, just as microbes remind us of fragility, they also remind us of resilience. Vaccines, antibiotics, and public health measures show that small interventions can counter small causes. Just as microbes ripple destruction, human choices ripple healing. The butterfly effect flows both ways, from tiny enemies to tiny cures. So far we have seen how microbes shift societies, but the butterfly effect also lives within the human mind, in memories and thoughts that shape choices across years. What happens inside your brain may feel private, but each neuron, each synapse can ripple outward into a life, a family, a history, and that is the ripple we follow next. Close your eyes and recall a memory. It may be something small, a laugh with a friend, a walk in the rain, a word someone once spoke to you. Yet notice how deeply that memory has shaped who you are. Memories are not passive recordings. They are active forces. They guide choices, color emotions, and sculpt identities. And just as with storms and wars, the butterfly effect thrives within memory. A single remembered detail, or a single forgotten one, can redirect the path of an entire life. The first proof comes from the fragility of memory itself. Neuroscience shows that each time you recall an event, you do not replay a perfect recording, you reconstruct it. Small changes enter, an image sharper here, a sound blurred there. Over time, the memory transforms. Consider a child remembering a parent's encouragement. Each retelling strengthens the belief in their own ability, guiding them toward achievements they might not have pursued otherwise. Now imagine if that encouragement had been forgotten, replaced instead with a harsher memory. Entire futures can hinge on what is remembered and what is lost. The butterfly's wings beat inside the architecture of memory. The second proof lies in trauma. A single event, sometimes only seconds long, can implant memories that shape decades. Soldiers recalling an explosion, children recalling a moment of violence, survivors recalling fear. These memories echo across time, influencing choices, relationships, even health. The original event was small in the scope of a lifetime, but its memory becomes a storm that ripples outward. Yet trauma also shows the other side of the butterfly effect, healing. A single supportive relationship, one act of kindness, one word of reassurance, can create new memories that begin to counterbalance the weight of the old. The third proof comes from false memories, those moments when the mind insists on events that never happened. Psychologists have shown how easy it is to implant false memories by suggestion, photographs, or repeated storytelling. A person may believe they were lost in a mall as a child, or that they saw something in detail when they did not. These false memories are not trivial. They influence decisions, behaviors, even testimony in courtrooms. A suggestion, a phrase, a photograph, small beginnings can ripple into real consequences through the architecture of memory. The fourth proof lies in collective memory, the way societies remember together. A nation's identity often rests not only on what happened, but on how it is remembered. Holidays, monuments, history books, these shape collective memory. Yet even here, small changes ripple outward. A detail emphasized or omitted, a narrative told differently in schools, can alter how generations view their past and therefore their future. Memory is not only personal, it is cultural, and the butterfly effect ensures that what we choose to remember or to forget alters the direction of nations. Now pause and reflect on your own memories. Which moments have defined you? Was it the encouragement of a teacher, the cruelty of a stranger, the laughter of a friend? At the time, these moments may have felt fleeting, but years later, you see their shape. You see how they guided your choices, your confidence, your relationships. The butterfly effect is alive in the mind, reminding us that small events do not fade, they echo. Philosophically, this carries a powerful lesson. Memory is not destiny, but it is influence. You cannot control every event that imprints itself on your mind, but you can nurture which memories you revisit, which you retell, which you allow to guide you. Each recollection strengthens the neural path. Each forgotten moment weakens it. The butterfly's wings inside your brain are your thoughts themselves. And so, from weather to war, from microbes to memories, we see that the butterfly effect flows through every scale of existence. But there is still one more domain to explore, the cosmos itself. What if the butterfly effect is not only within life, but within the stars? What if the very universe we inhabit is the product of small beginnings, rippling outward into galaxies? That is where we turn next. Look up at the night sky. Each star feels eternal, unchanging, a pin of light fixed in darkness, yet behind that calm lies chaos, tiny fluctuations magnified across eons, rippling outward into galaxies, planets, and the possibility of life itself. The butterfly effect is not confined to Earth, it is woven into the cosmos. From the smallest quantum variations to the formation of galaxies, the universe we inhabit today is the outcome of delicate ripples that began billions of years ago. The first proof comes from the Big Bang itself. Cosmologists tell us that in the earliest moments of the universe, matter was distributed almost evenly, almost but not quite. There were tiny fluctuations, variations in density, no greater than 1 part in 100,000. These invisible differences, magnified over billions of years, became galaxies, stars, and planets. Without them, the universe would have remained a uniform soup, without structure, without life. The butterfly effect here is cosmic. A faint ripple in the first second of time became the Milky Way itself. The second proof lies in the birth of stars. A single star forms when clouds of gas collapse under gravity, but the collapse depends on subtle variations, slightly denser regions, slight differences in temperature. One variation, and a star ignites. That star may later explode in a supernova, scattering heavy elements into space. Those elements, iron, oxygen, carbon, become the building blocks of life. Trace your body back far enough and you find yourself in the tiniest density fluctuation of a gas cloud billions of years ago. Your very existence is a ripple of cosmic chance. The third proof comes from planetary formation. Planets form from disks of dust around stars, but their positions and compositions depend on countless tiny collisions. Grains of dust clumping, pebbles merging, fragments scattering. Change the trajectory of a single pebble in the early solar system, and Earth might not have formed as it did, water might never have arrived, life might never have emerged. The butterfly effect in planetary physics reminds us that our world is not inevitable, it is fragile, born of countless small accidents of motion. The fourth proof lies in the possibility of alternate worlds. Astronomers have discovered thousands of exoplanets orbiting other stars, each formed from its own chaotic sequence of dust and collisions. Some may have oceans, others deserts of fire, others frozen wastelands. Each is a ripple of chance, a different outcome of tiny cosmic beginnings. If one detail in our own solar system had shifted, we might not be here to wonder at all. The butterfly's wings beat across light years, shaping realities we will never fully see. Now pause and reflect. The stars above you are not distant, separate things. They are proof of the butterfly effect at scale. You are alive because of fluctuations in the early universe, because of tiny differences in collapsing gas, because of small collisions in the dust of the solar system. Your existence rests on cosmic details you will never touch or measure. Philosophically, this realization is humbling. We often imagine ourselves as small, insignificant in the vastness of space, yet we are also the product of that vastness. The same principle that explains a butterfly's wing shaping a storm explains why you exist at all. Tiny ripples became galaxies, galaxies became stars, stars became the elements of your body. The butterfly effect does not only connect us to storms on Earth, it connects us to the birth of the cosmos itself. And so, as we near the end of this journey, the picture becomes clear. From microbes to memories, from wolves in Yellowstone to storms in Texas, from chance encounters to galaxies, the butterfly effect threads through every scale of existence. But there is one final step to take, a reflection on what it means for us, here and now, living our lives inside this web of ripples. We have traveled from storms to stars, from microbes to empires, tracing how the smallest causes ripple into the largest effects. But before this journey closes, we must bring the butterfly home to you, to your choices, to the fragile and powerful ways your daily life shapes the world around you. The butterfly effect is not only history and science, it is also personal. Every gesture, every hesitation, every decision you make creates waves that extend far beyond your sight. The first proof lies in daily kindness. Imagine a simple act, holding the door for a stranger, offering a smile, speaking a word of encouragement. To you, it feels small, almost forgettable. Yet for the other person, it may shift the tone of their day, influence how they treat others, and ripple outward into dozens of lives. Research on emotional contagion shows that moods spread through social networks. Your moment of kindness may echo through hundreds of people, none of whom will ever know your name. A butterfly flaps its wings, and the air feels lighter for all who breathe it. The second proof is the legacy of habit. The routines you choose, what you eat, how you move, how you speak, become patterns that shape your family, your friends, and even future generations. A parent who models curiosity plants the seed of exploration in their child. A friend who practices discipline inspires others to do the same. Habits ripple through households and communities, multiplying over time. What feels like a private choice, a morning run, an evening of reading, may become the foundation of cultures and traditions that last beyond your lifetime. The third proof lies in creativity. A single piece of art, a story, a song may touch only one person at first, but that person carries it forward, inspired, changed, and shares it with others. Movements in culture often begin with individuals creating something small in obscurity. A poem written in solitude becomes the anthem of a generation. A photograph posted quietly online becomes the image that sparks a movement. Creativity is the butterfly wing of the human spirit, fragile, intimate, but capable of storms. The fourth proof rests in decisions unseen. You may never know the full consequence of your choices. Perhaps you missed an appointment and avoided disaster. Perhaps you spoke at just the right moment to alter someone's future. Perhaps your very presence in someone's life preserved them in ways you will never hear about. Life is filled with hidden ripples, consequences you will not live to see, yet they exist, they are real, and they are part of the design that stretches forward long after you are gone. Now pause and let this truth settle. The butterfly effect is not only theory, it is not only storms, wars, or galaxies, it is the air around you, the choices you make, the ripples you create. You are both a cause and an effect, a node in the endless web of existence. Your life is not isolated, it is stitched into everything. Philosophically, this is both a burden and a gift. A burden because it reminds you that your actions matter, even when you wish they did not. A gift because it means that even your smallest choices hold meaning. You are not powerless, you are part of the endless chain of causes and effects that shapes the world. The butterfly effect does not only belong to history, it belongs to you. And so, as this journey reaches its final turn, you are invited to see yourself differently, not as separate from storms and stars, but as part of them. The same principle that explains why galaxies form also explains why your smile matters. The same laws that magnify a decimal into a hurricane magnify your choices into futures you may never witness. The butterfly is inside you, in your memories, in your habits, in your gestures, and every day with every breath its wings are beating. You have walked through storms, through history, through memories and stars. You have seen how the smallest details ripple outward into futures vast and unpredictable. And now, as this journey draws to a close, it is time to slow down, to let the rhythm soften, to rest in the awareness of how connected everything truly is. Think of your breath, in and out. A quiet cycle, unnoticed, ordinary, yet with each inhale you take in oxygen, born from ancient stars, carried by forests, shared by countless lives around you. With each exhale you return carbon, feeding trees, feeding futures. Even here, in the rise and fall of your chest, the butterfly effect is alive. Think of your choices, the words you have spoken today, the silences you have kept, the gestures so small you may have already forgotten them. They ripple outward now, carried in the minds and hearts of others. Perhaps tomorrow they will ripple again, reaching people you will never meet. You are part of this endless web, not only shaped by it, but shaping it in return. And think of time. The path that led you here tonight was built on countless small turns, conversations, delays, accidents, and encounters. Each step a thread, weaving together to place you in this moment. The butterfly effect is not only history or science, it is the reason you are here, listening, breathing, reflecting. So let the thought rest gently within you. Nothing is too small to matter. Every gesture, every choice, Every breath belongs to the great unfolding. You are not separate from it. You are inside it. You are part of the pattern. And as the wings beat on, quiet, unseen, eternal, you can allow yourself to simply be, knowing that even your stillness carries meaning.